NSA Scotland decided to round up some top tips on how to ensure sheep farmers get the best results from their rams this autumn. We managed to catch up with Neil Lane, a vet from the Clyde Veterinary Group, while he was visiting a sheep farm in Lanarkshire.
The best advice is that these sheep should be quarantined and be given a quarantine treatment for scab, fluke and internal roundworms. In adult sheep, realistically, they shouldn't really have that big a burden of internal gutworms, really, because they have got an inherent immunity, an age immunity as they get older, but it's still best practice. So you'd be wanting to use either your Zolvix or your StarTech would be the two that you'd recommend for gutworms, and then a scab treatment. So an injectable is probably what everyone would normally use, so Dectomax or Cydectin type product, and then your fluke drench shouldn't be triclobendazole because it's the one that you're most likely to have resistance to. The issue is what do you do with these tups that you buy? Do you keep them separate until the day you kick them out into the field, or do you want to mix them with your own stock tups? If you mix them with your own stock tups, I always think the best way to do it is put them all in the bus in a big tight pen so they can't actually fight with each other, and then by the time they all rub around each other and had a good stiff and tired themselves out, you can put them back out after that. Depends on the breed, but your average breeds, Shield and Rams could easily mate between 60 and 100 ewes each. So condition score, well, everybody should know where to condition score. So the muscles of the loin and I suppose over the rib would be the other place, and the tail head, although it's probably the least accurate of the whole lot. But you don't want them to be much more than probably a 3.5. 3 to 3.5 is ideal for mating. Quite often when you go to buy them, they'll be 4, which is too fat, and that's part of the issue. You need to manage the condition of them a little bit before you use them, otherwise they end up just being fat and lazy and not overly keen to go and work. So this tup is probably 3.5, 3 3/4. He's certainly not a 4. You can still feel the individual lateral spinous processes, although with kind of firm pressure. So he's definitely a 3.5. He's certainly not as fat as a 4. So he's actually he's in good working condition. It's not too fat. Realistically, he will have had some concentrates, and you want to give him some when he gets home, but not necessarily an awful lot. But probably the most important thing is speaking to the vendor and finding out what you get fed beforehand. Right, when you're examining a ram prior to purchase for breeding, some important things to look at when it comes to testicles. One of the things that is important is the overall size of the testicles, so the scrotal circumference at its widest point, which is kind of where my fingers and thumbs are just now. There's a strong correlation in lambs between scrotal circumferences of less than 30 centimetres and infertility. So it's probably a good idea to sort of roughly work out what that circumference inside your own fingers and thumbs are. So rather than taking a tape measure to a sale, if you know what that circumference in there is, and then you're just using that as a guide, if you can't fit your hands round it, then that's clearly bigger than 36 centimetres, which is what that is in me. So this ram's clearly got a big enough scrotal circumference, and the bigger they are, the more ewes they're going to mate, and so potentially the more use is going to be to you. The next point is to check that the testicles are of equal size, so you pull them down to the bottom and these two look pretty level left to right. That's normal. The next thing you should do is check that both testicles move freely in the scrotum. There aren't any adhesions, so they're not stuck to anything, which might be a sign they've had an infection. And then you want to just check that the epididymis, which is the little bit at the bottom that stores the sperm before it's used, it should be about the size of a walnut, and it should be quite firm. If they're too big, it doesn't make an awful lot of difference. It's probably more relevant if they're smaller than you'd expect them to be, because that's where the sperm's stored, so obviously they'll not be able to tup as many ewes. And then you're just checking the consistency of each testicle. It should feel, if you straighten out your finger and thumb, it should feel the same as that bit of tissue, the bit of skin and muscle between your finger and thumb. If you relax it and you you then press that bit, it's really soft. That's probably overly soft, but that's a good guide as to how firm each testicle should be. Another thing you want to check is that the cord, so the bit from the top of the testicle up to his body, is the same on both sides, and there aren't any lumps or bumps in it, which should all be a sign that there's potentially problems. And that's probably the basic examination that you need to do before you of the testicles before you buy them. This tup probably looks completely normal. From a distance, you wouldn't necessarily think there was anything wrong with this tup's testicles, but when you get in and actually palpate them, and it's quite a good idea to pull them tight down to the bottom of the scrotum, you can actually see there that the left testicle appears a little bit bigger than the right testicle, and that isn't normal. They should both be of equal size. Another thing is maybe you could probably see there's a bit of fluid inside the scrotum, and that's, you know, the fluid shouldn't be there. You can almost see it wobbling back and forward. The right testicle in this tup, when you get them down, feels the epididymis at the bottom should feel quite firm. In him it's actually a little bit bigger, it's about double the size it should be, but the testicle itself feels the same consistency as the epididymis, and it should be a good bit softer. In his left testicle, the epididymis is the right sort of size, so it's about the size of a walnut or the end of your thumb. The testicle itself is actually a little bit enlarged. You can feel the epididymis, which runs in the inside of the testicle, you can feel it all the way up the back, and the cord at the top doesn't feel overly normal. There's still a bit of fluid up there, so it's not necessarily the easiest thing in the world to see. So this tup is physically abnormal, so I wouldn't expect this to be a stock getter at all, pretty much as much because this right testicle is really small and hard and an awful lot firmer, and the left testicle is probably a bit softer. So this one you'll probably not get any semen out of, and this one you might get some, but chances are it probably won't be very good. So that's something to be aware of. Don't just look at the testicle from a distance. You really need to get in and feel both sides to check that it's okay before you decide to buy it.